Who is the least important person in the hobby? Or the sports card world, for that matter. You might be having some thoughts run through your head right now, thinking about who it might be. Maybe you're on the side of, you've got to be a collector to be super legitimate in the hobby, or someone that's accepted. You might be that type of person that's like, until I see you die with that card in your hand, you are not legitimately a collector. You got to go to the grave with those things, right? You can't sell them. Maybe you saw someone buy a card in September and now they're selling it in January. How could they possibly be a collector if they only held on to it for that long? That was a little extra, but that's the attitude that some people present online. And I want to present the idea that we all hold importance in the hobby, that without every single type of different individual on the spectrum of collector to flipper, just like any other, system in the world, we could even talk about food chains and the animals, the way that they all are a part of the ecosystem, all those things. We could get really sciencey, really nerdy about it. I think the fact, not that we're eating each other, right? But the fact that we all have different things to offer, different attitudes, different ideas, different ways to progress the industry, different ways to hold on to the tradition of sports card collecting, all those things, it's all important, and we need to collaboratively work together. We don't need to treat this like high school. You know what I mean? The first day going there, you're a freshman, you're probably scared of the older kids. The older kids probably think you're this stupid little kid that came in or whatever. Hopefully that's not the way it is anymore. At least that was the way that it was presented in my brain. The anxiety around it was presented in my brain that way. We shouldn't treat people like that in the sports card world either. And I think that sometimes we can risk doing that when we're gatekeeping new people coming in. And oftentimes it's not because you hate the person. It's not because you think that they're terrible, blah, blah, blah. Even if you say that, it is all based on your fear of what the individual brings. It's your fear of change. It's stuff to look at internally. I mean, we're talking science today. We're talking therapy today, all wrapped into sports cards. I won't dive into that too much, but that is something internally with you. That is something that is completely fear-based. That is something that you might be turning away a good person out of your own fear. That's something to address within yourself. That's something to figure out. The fact that a new person coming into something that you know to be a certain way threatens you, and then you don't want them in your industry, hobby, collecting space, world, whatever. That person is also important. And that's not to say that when someone does something wrong, we shouldn't address that. When someone is a toxic individual in our community, that we don't need to address that. And even possibly if it gets extreme, separate from them, or what needs to be done. But that individual, when it comes down to that, should still be given a chance to change what they're doing and possibly, come back in with you. You don't need to connect to that individual, but you also don't need to push them out before you know anything. Let people come in. People are going to have different ideas. Sometimes those ideas present change. Sometimes change is scary, but a lot of times change is good. And when change isn't good, then you can see that, and then you can go back to the old way of doing things if necessary. But I think that the hobby as a whole needs its collectors. It's truly traditional, hardcore, I'm going to hold on to these cards, probably even pass them down to generations beyond me kind of collector. And we also need the flipper, the person who might buy a card on Tuesday and sell it on Friday. Because those both need to be there in order for cards to even be obtained. They need to be there for new ideas to be presented. There needs to be liquidity. Even when you're a collector, if you're not the one selling it, you need liquidity. You need people who are going to let go of the cards that you want to put into your collection, right? If everyone just collected the cards and held on to them forever, sure, you could probably find retail boxes at your local store like Target or Walmart or whatever. Sure, you could find cards occasionally on eBay, but it would be less and less kind of thing or whatever. You need the flow of cards. You need that system in which people are buying and selling and all of those things. we don't need to get mad when we see someone sell a card earlier than we think they should. There's not even a designated time for being a collector. And we don't even know people's scenarios too. Maybe they're selling the card because they're in a really, really rough spot, right? Maybe they need the money to put food on the table with the family, and that's totally legitimate. Honestly, any reason is legitimate. Maybe they just decided they didn't like the card as much as they thought. Maybe they're still a collector of that, series or brand of card or that player or that team, but they saw a card they liked more of that, whatever it is, put in the label there, and knew that if they sold that card, they could get that other card they liked better. Maybe that card shot up in value and they decided that they'd rather have multiple cards of something than that one card, and they sold it for that. Or maybe they just decided to sell it. That's just the thing. This isn't supposed to be like a video where it's just like all praising sellers. I just really think it's important for us to not push anyone away. We're such a small, we've grown so much, especially after the COVID shutdown. But we're also so small at the same time, like in the grand scheme of things. Like we're such a niche community, such a kind of like cool, nerdy thing that's like, it's almost secretive in this way that like people's minds are blown when I tell them how many people go to the National and things like that. And the National is huge. And the industry is huge, and collecting space, the hobby, all the things you want to call it. But it is so small at the same time. And we can't risk just throwing people out because we decide we don't like how much they sell something or whatever too. We need to grow. We need this thing to last. We need to let people be the way that they are within it, as long as it's healthy for the overall thing. And one of the healthiest things you can do for a community, they've done studies on this. Even when we're talking like small communities, like small towns, one of the healthiest aspects of it is being able to collaborate with your neighbor who may or may not be different than you. It might be cooperate with them. And this space allows for a lot of cooperation and collaborative chances and opportunities. And the more and more we do that, we can start humanizing each other. We can start seeing what brought us into collecting and sports cards and selling. And we can enjoy the different ways that we do it, because we are going to all do it differently. There's not even a hard like collector versus flipper. There's all sorts of percentages. Like, I don't even know what percentage I would be at. I mean, I run sales on Twitter 3 to 4 days a week. So one person might look at my Twitter page and think that I'm only a seller. But then some of you might know that I PC Baltimore Ravens cards and literally everything. Like, I will buy a 5-cent base Baltimore Ravens card and get super excited about it. And I'm keeping that. I'm not selling it. Unless I have a double or a triple, then I'll sell those. But I'm keeping one of every card I find. Like, does that make me... What is my percentage? Am I legitimate? Am I... that's just all stuff to think about. But I just want to boil this down to, we're all important. We all have something to bring to the table. Let's start cooperating and collaborating more. Peace and love.